morning, everyone. We will now continue our discussion in statistical tests. So we will be discussing another type of statistical test today. So we have here the t-test. So what's the difference between t-test and z-test? So we have already discussed what is z-test. So if the population standard deviation is known, we will be using the z-test. But then, if the population standard deviation is unknown, we will be using the t-test. So we have here that t-test is a statistical test for the mean of a population and is used when the population is normally or approximately normally distributed and the sample standard deviation and the population standard deviation is unknown. The formula for the t-test is 1. T is equal to the sample mean minus the population mean all over the standard deviation, the sample standard deviation all over the square root of n. So, in here, the formula for t-test is somewhat similar sa formula natin ng z-test. But since the population standard deviation is unknown dito sa t-test natin, let us remember dun sa z-test natin, we will be using that if the population standard deviation is given. But then, if ang given sa problem ay sample standard deviation, we will be using the t-test instead. So we have here the degrees of freedom can be calculated by this formula n minus 1 or the number of sample minus 1. So gagamitin kasi natin tong degrees of freedom natin in reading our t-test distribution table. So we will be using this t-test distribution table to get our critical value. Okay, so pareho lang kung paano natin babasahin yung z-table natin before with this t-table natin. So, let's say for example, ang makukuha natin na degrees of freedom is 1, and then ang alpha natin is this one, 0.1% and 1 tail siya. So, ibig sabihin, ang z-value natin is this one. So, ganun lang. Pareho lang din naman yung pagbabasa natin with our previous discussion kung saan lang sila nag-intersect. Okay, so find the critical t-value for alpha. This one is alpha. Paki-check na lang. Alpha is equal to 0.05 with a degrees of freedom of 16 for a right-tailed t-test. So, how will we calculate this one? So, we have here, ang sabi dyan, the critical value, the alpha rather is 0.05. And ang sabi dyan, right-tailed test. So, meaning to say, this is a one-tailed test. So, this is 0.05 and ang degrees of freedom daw natin ay 16. So, meaning to say, we will check our table here. The degrees of freedom is 16. And our alpha is 0.05. So, ang intersection mo is this one. So, that is 1.75. 1.746. Ano nandun ba? 1.746. So, that is the critical t-value. This one. This is the critical t-value. Next, find the critical t-value for alpha is equal to 0.01 with degrees of freedom of 22 for a left-tailed test. So, dito naman, balikan natin doon, find the 0.01 column in the row labeled 1 tail and find 22 in the left column. So, the critical value daw would be negative 2.508. So, let's check kung 2.508 daw. Okay, so let's check this one. So, ang alpha natin is 0.01 daw, ang alpha natin. And our degrees of freedom is 22. 0.01 this part and 22. So, that is 2.508. But then, this is a left tail test, so ibig sabihin negative siya. So, the critical value is negative 2.508. So, the same thing pa rin kung paano natin i-determine kung i-reject ba natin or i-accept natin ang null hypothesis natin. The same thing dun sa G value natin or sa G critical natin. So, kapag yung makakalculate natin na T natin, na T value natin ay nasa rejection region, and that, so therefore we will reject the null hypothesis. Pero kapag yung makakalculate natin na T value natin is on the acceptance region, so meaning to say we will accept the null hypothesis. So pareho lang kung paano natin ini-interpret this one. Find the critical value for alpha is equal to 0.10 with degrees of freedom of 18 for a two-tailed t-test. So let's check the table again. So ang sabi, ang alpha daw natin is 0.10 and that is two-tailed test. So this one, two-tailed. So 0. No, dito tayo. Two-tailed siya. So this one, 0.10 ay ang degrees of freedom daw natin ay 18. So nandito yung 18, yeah. So this is 1.734. So since this is two-tailed test, therefore our critical t-value is negative 1.734 and positive 1.734. Okay, so that's it. So when you test hypothesis by using the t-test method, follow the following procedure. So again, pareho lang ulit siya dun sa z-test natin. So pareho lang na meron tayong 5 steps. So first is state the hypothesis and identify the claim. Next is find the critical values from the table, compute the test value, and make decision whether you will reject or not reject the null hypothesis, and then summarize the result. So, remember, sabi dito that the t-test should be used when the population is approximately normally distributed and the population standard deviation is unknown. So, ang given lang sa atin again is the sample standard deviation, not the population standard deviation. Okay, so we have an example here. A medical investigation claims that the average number of infection per week at a hospital is 16.3. A random sample of 10 weeks had a mean number of 17.7 infections. The sample standard deviation, so take note, we are given here sample standard deviation. So kapag in cases where dalawa ang given, let's say ang given is sample standard deviation and population standard deviation. So, depende na kung ano yung tinatanong sa problem. So, kapag ang tinanong is z-test, so you can proceed with z-test. Kapag ang tinatanong ay t-test, you can proceed with t-test. Kapag given na dalawa. Is there enough evidence to reject the investigator's claim at alpha is equal to 0.05? So, it's step 1. Let us state the hypothesis and identify the claim. So for our null hypothesis, the population mean is equal to 16.3. And for our alternative hypothesis, the population mean is not equal to 16.3. So yung mean kasi natin dito or the average number of infection is 16.3 given naman sa problem natin. Step 2, after determining our hypothesis, since we know naman ang alpha natin is 0.05. So, the critical values are this one, positive since this is a two-tailed test kasi hindi naman sinabi kung lesser or greater. So, that is a two-tailed test. So, meaning to say, positive and negative yung critical values natin. So, upon checking our table, alam naman natin na ang alpha natin is 0.05 and we have random sample, sabi dito na 10 weeks. So, ang sample natin ay 10. So, ang standard deviation natin would be 10 minus 1 is equal to 9. So, kapag i-check natin yung table natin, so let's see kung tama ba yung nakuha natin na critical value. So, our degrees of freedom is 9 and our alpha is 0.05, and two-tailed siya. So, nandito siya. Tama. 2.262. Since this is 0.05, 2.262. Yeah, 2.262. Next step, we will now calculate the test value. So, using the presented equation kanina, this one, t is equal to the sample mean minus the population mean all over the standard deviation, sample standard deviation all over square root of n. So, our sample mean is this one, random sample, and ang mean number daw natin is 17.7 minus our population mean, which is 16.3 all over our standard deviation, which is 1.8 all over square root of 10. So, ang ating test value or the calculated t-value is 2.46. Step 4, we will reject the null hypothesis since, so upon comparing our test value with our critical value, the test value is greater than the critical value. And we know that yung test value natin ay nasa area siya ng rejection region. Therefore, we will reject the null hypothesis. So, here's the graph. So, nandito yung test value natin. Nandito yung critical value natin, mother, positive 2.262 and negative 2.262. And ang test value natin, or yung na-calculate natin na value is 2.46. So, nandito siya sa rejection region natin. Therefore, we will reject the null hypothesis. So, we can say that there is enough evidence to reject the claim that the average number of infection is 16.3. Another example, an educator claims that the average salary of a substitute teachers in school districts in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania is less than $60 per day. A random sample of 8 school districts is selected and the daily salaries in dollars are shown. Is there enough evidence to support the educator's claim at alpha is equal to 0.10? So, ito daw yung daily salaries in dollars. So, our claim, our hypothesis is step 1. Let us state our hypothesis. So, for our null hypothesis, the mean is equal to $60. And for our alternative hypothesis, our mean is lesser than $60. So, nandito naman, mababasa natin sa problem, it is stated that less than $60. So, yun ang claim natin. So, step 2, at alpha is equal to 0.10 and degrees of freedom of 7, the critical values is negative 1.415. So, kapag i-check natin sa table, ang nakukuha natin na value is 1.415, but then, since this is a left-tailed test, kaya negative yung value natin. Step 3 is to compute the test value or the t-value natin. So, the mean standard deviation must be found. So, again, we already know naman na kung paano mag-calculate ng standard deviation natin. So, if it's not given in the problem, of course, you will have to calculate it first. So, using the formula na na-discuss natin previously, the mean is $58.88. So, i-add lang lahat tong given na data natin divided by, we have 2, 4, 6, 8. So, i-add lahat ng data natin divided by 8. So, that is 58.88. And our standard deviation is 5.08. And then, plugging in the values in our equation, ang makakalculate natin na t-value natin or the test value natin is negative 0.624. So, we will not reject the null hypothesis, or we will accept the null hypothesis since negative 0.624 falls in the non-critical region or sa acceptance region natin. So, our critical value is here, negative 415, and our test value is here, negative 624, negative 0.624. So, nandito yung acceptance region natin, the shaded, nandito yung rejection region natin, rather, the shaded part, at yung rejection region natin, and this one, yung hindi shaded part, is the acceptance region. So, therefore, since nandito yung yung test value natin, we will accept the null hypothesis. So we can then say that there is not enough evidence to support the educator's claim that the average salary of substitute teacher in Allegheny County is less than $60 per day. So that is how we use the formula for t-test kapag given ang mean natin. How about if we will compare two means of independent sample? Kapag meron kang, sa mga previous example kasi natin, isang data set lang or isang sample lang ang given sa atin. Paano kapag may dalawang given kang sample or may dalawang given kang data sets? Hindi lang iisa, dalawa ang given sa'yo. So, magkakaroon ulit tayo ng another formula for that. So, this one naman, testing the difference between two means of independent samples using the t-test. So, again, t-test lang din to, pero iba lang yung formula ang gagamitin natin because we will be comparing two means. So, ano ba kapag sinabi natin na independent samples? Samples are independent samples when they are not related. Also, it will be assumed that the variances are not equal. So, ibig sabihin, may dalawang dataset ka or may dalawang sample ka, pero independent sila or hindi na-apektuhan ng isang sample mo yung kabila. So, variances are assumed to be unequal. So, this one, ito ang gagamitin natin. T is equal to the sample mean of the first data set and minus the sample mean of the second data set minus the difference of the population mean all over square root of the standard deviation square root of the square of the standard deviation of the first data and all over the number of sample plus the square of the standard deviation of the second data set all over the number of sample. Most of the time, this part, itong difference of the population mean is 0 kasi hindi yan usually given kapag ang pinagko-compare natin ay two means of independent sample. Ang mga given lang usually dyan ay itong sample mean natin, hindi yung population mean. So, assumption for t-test for two independent means when the sample standard deviation are when the population standard deviation are unknown. Pero ang given sa atin ay yung sample standard deviation. Okay, so we have an example here. The average size of a farm in a certain country X is 191. The average size of a farm in country Y is 199. Assume that the data were obtained from two samples or two data sets with a standard deviation of 38 and 12 respectively and sample sizes of 8 and 10. Can it be concluded at alpha is equal to 0.05 that the average size of the farm in the two countries is different, assume that the populations are normally distributed. So, in this example, hindi naman yung country X natin is hindi naman makaka-affect dun sa country Y natin. Kung gaano kalawak yung farm dun sa country X, walang pakialam yung country Y. So, wala silang pakialamanan. So, meaning to say, they are independent. So, we will be using this formula. Okay, so for our step 1, state the hypothesis and identify the claim for the mean. So in this problem, hindi naman sinabi kung less than or greater than siya. Sinabi lang is to prove na the two countries is different. So for our null hypothesis, the mean of the first sample or the mean of the first country is equal to the mean of the second country. And for our alternative hypothesis, the mean of the first country is not equal to the second country. So this is our claim. Kasi ang sabi, different. So hindi sila equal. So this is our claim. So find the critical value. Since the test is two-tailed siya, obviously, and our alpha is 0.05. And since the variances are unequal, the degrees of freedom are the smaller of n-1 or n2 minus 1. In this case, the degrees of freedom are 8 minus 1. Kasi ang sabi dyan, ang sample size daw natin is 8 and 10. For the country X, ang sample natin is 8 and for the country Y, ang sample natin ay 10. Pero ang sabi, ang pipiliin natin na sample ay yung smaller. So in this case, ang smaller is 8. Therefore, 8 minus 1, so our degrees of freedom is 7. Hence, from the table, the critical value are 2 positive and negative 2.365. So let's check na yung table natin. So this is 7 and our alpha is 0.2.365. This one. Dito, 2.365. So this is our alpha. So this is our critical t-value. Okay, so let's go back. So, ulitin ko lang, ang gagamitin natin in calculating for the degrees of freedom is yung smaller value natin, smaller sample size. So, that is 8 minus 1, so 7 ang ginamit natin. And, so our critical values are this 2.365 and negative 2.365. So, for our step 3, we will now compute the test value. So, this one. So, input lang natin yung mga given sa problem natin. So, for the t-value ng first country, that is 1.91, and for the second country is 1.99. So, again, like what I've said kanina, this part is usually 0 na siya kasi wala namang given sa problem. Kasi ang pinagko-compare natin dito ay yung dalawang sample means lang naman. Hindi naman given yung population means. So, 0 na lang natin siya. Huwag tayong maghanap ng wala. All over the square root of the standard deviation of the two all over their sample size. Ang test value natin upon calculating is this one, negative 0.57. Now, since we already know the test value, we will now compare the test value with our critical values. So, step 4, make the decision. So, our decision here is to do not reject the null hypothesis or accept the null hypothesis since yung critical values natin ay nandito sa shaded area na to. And our test value is in this part. Nasa region siya ng acceptance region natin. So, therefore, we will accept the null hypothesis. There is not enough evidence to support the claim that the average size of the farm is different. Kasi, in-accept natin yung null hypothesis. So, that's it. Okay, so how will we use naman yung t-test natin? How will we do t-test using software, using our Microsoft Excel? So, again, kapag magtithesis naman kayo, we will not be doing it mano-mano. We will be using software. So, let's try to solve this one using Microsoft Excel. Okay, so let's try to do it using Microsoft Excel given the following data. So, we have here the set A, input lang natin, and the same thing, the set B, input lang natin. And then, just like our previous discussion, pupunta lang tayo dito sa data and we will click the data analysis. So, ganito lang din naman yung ginagawa natin sa mga previous na na-discuss natin sa paggamit ng Microsoft Excel. And then, we will just choose the two sample assuming an equal variances. This one. So, obviously, unequal tong variances nila. So, we'll just click OK. And then, variable range. So, this one, click lang natin siya. And variable to range is this one. And then, hypothesize mean difference. Wala naman tayong given na mean difference. And our alpha is 0.05. So, tama. And let's just click OK. Okay, so after that, magpapakita to. So here's our generated result. So now we will check the critical value and the test value. So ating critical value is 2.10 and our test value is 2.47. So the critical value is the lesser than the test value. Therefore, we will reject the null hypothesis. The same thing din dun sa p-value natin. So, if you remember, yung p-value natin kapag mas mas mataas yung alpha natin compared dun sa p-value natin, we will reject the null hypothesis. So, our calculated p-value is 0.02 and our alpha value kanina is 0.05. So, 0.02 is lesser than 0.05. Therefore, we will reject the null hypothesis. So, ganun lang kung paano natin i-interpret yung mga values na mag-generate ng Microsoft Excel natin. Kanina, the t-test was used to compare two sample means when the samples were independent. This time naman, a different version of t-test a different version of t-test will be explained. So this version, this type of or this this type naman, the samples are dependent rather. So kanina independent yung samples natin, ngayon naman dependent. So samples are considered to be dependent when the subjects are paired or matched in some ways. So let's say for example, ang gusto mong i-test is the effect of study habits sa pre-test and post-test ng estudyante. So, di ba, yung pre-test and post-test natin may relationship sila or they are dependent sample, nakadepende sila sa isa't isa. Therefore, we will be using t-test, this formula of t-test kasi dependent sample sila. Ano pa ang mga example ng mga dependent na samples natin? Ang halimbawa pa nito is a medical research. So if you want to see whether a drug will affect the reaction time of its users, so to test this hypothesis, para malaman natin kung may magiging effect ba ang drug, the researcher will conduct a pre-test dun sa subject na gusto mong i-test. Halimbawa, may mga pasyente ka, gusto mong i-test kung may magiging effect ba yung drug na to. So, nung hindi pa nila tinetake, so that is the pre-test. So, kunin mo ngayon yung result nila. And then, pinag-take mo sila ng gamot, meron ka na ngayong, test mo ulit sila, meron ka na ngayong post-test. So, meron kang pre-test and post-test ng drug na yan. So, therefore, i-compare mo yung pre-test and post-test para malaman mo kung may significant difference ba. So, that is dependent samples. So, the formula that we will be using is this one. T is equal to the mean of the difference of the mean minus the mean all over the standard deviation all over the square root of n. So again, our degrees of freedom here is n minus 1. So paano natin i-calculate yung d natin? D with this one, bar line is equal to, so yung sum or yung summation ng difference of the mean natin all over n. And for our standard deviation, it will be calculated this way. So, example. A dietitian wishes to see if the person's cholesterol level will change if the diet is supplemented by a certain mineral. 6 subjects were pre-tested and then they took the mineral supplement for 6-week period. The results are shown in the table. Cholesterol levels measured in milligrams per deciliter. Can it be concluded that the cholesterol level has been changed at alpha is equal to 0.10? Assume that the variable is normally distributed. So, ito yung sample natin. So, dito, ang tinatanong is, yung cholesterol level ba ng patient or ng tao is magbabago kapag nag-take sila ng mineral supplement, kapag nag-take sila ng mineral. So, dito naman, titingnan natin kung magkakaroon ba siya ng significant change or significant difference. So, first, let us state our hypothesis. State the hypothesis and identify the claim that the diet is effective. The before cholesterol level should be different from the after level. So, ang claim kasi natin is that di ba nagkaroon ng pre-test, tinest nila yung mga sample natin before sila nag-take ng mineral, and then tinest nila yung mga sample natin after nilang mag-take ng mineral, and then i-compare nila yung before and after. So, ang gusto nating i-prove dito ay dapat may magbago dun sa cholesterol level nila after nilang mag-take ng mineral supplement. So, our null hypothesis here would be the mineral supplement has no significant effect on the cholesterol level or equal to 0 siya, walang nagbago, walang pagbabago. For our alternative hypothesis naman, the mineral supplement has a significant. The mineral supplement has a significant effect on the cholesterol level. So, next step, after natin ma-determine yung null and alternative hypothesis natin, we will now find the critical value. So, the degrees of freedom are 5. So, we have 6 ang data natin. So, 6 minus 1, so that is 5. And ang alpha natin is 0.10. So, upon checking sa table natin, since this is a two-tailed test, yan, this is a two-tailed test, so that is positive and negative 2.015. And then, compute the test value. So, medyo mahaba-haba yung pang-compute natin ng test value because bago natin makalculate yung t natin or yung test value natin, we will first calculate these values. Okay, so make the table. So, yan. So, nandito yung before sila nag-take ng supplement and then after nilang nag-take ng supplement. So, yung d natin, yung difference ng mga values natin would be this one. So, 210 minus 190 is equal to 220. 235 minus 170 is 65 and so on. So, i-subtract nyo lang yung after natin from our before na values para makuha natin itong mga to. And then, after that, i-add nyo lang sila. Get the summation of the difference. And summation of the difference. And then, i-square lang natin yung difference. Yung nakuha natin na difference ng x2 and x1 natin. So, that would be 20 squared is 400. 65 squared is 4,225. Negative 2 squared is 4 and so on. And again, kukunin lang din natin yung summation nila. So, i-add nyo lang lahat yan para makuha natin itong 4,890. And then, next is the mean of the difference. So, para makuha natin yung mean or the average, so we will just get yung summation natin, 100 all over our total number of sample is 6. So, our mean or the mean of the difference is 16.7. So, since nakuha naman na natin yung value ng summation of the square, yan, summation of the square of the difference, and nakalculate na din natin yung summation ng d natin. So, pwede na natin siya i-input sa equation natin. So, our n is 6 times the summation of the d square, that is 4,890, minus the summation of our difference, that is 100 squared all over. The total number of our sample is 6 minus 6 times 6 minus 1. So, ang makukuha natin is 25.4. The standard deviation, therefore, is 25.4. And then, we will just plug in these values dun sa equation natin. So, that would be the test value is equal to 16.7 minus 0 kasi wala namang given na population mean. So, that is 0 all over 25.4 all over square root of 6. So, our test value or the calculated value is 1.61. And then, we will now make the decision. So, yung nakuha natin kanina na critical value is this one. So, kapag ipa-plot natin siya, nandito siya negative and positive. And yung test value natin, or yung calculated value natin, ay nasa labas siya ng rejection region natin. Nasa acceptance region siya. Therefore, we will accept the null hypothesis. Ang sabi, there is not enough evidence to support the claim that the mineral changes a person's cholesterol. Therefore, we can conclude that the mineral supplement has no significant effect on the cholesterol level. Wala siyang naging significant effect. So, that is how we test the hypothesis using t-test kapag kapag dependent yung samples natin. So, we can also do that one using our Microsoft Excel. Okay, let's try to do it in Microsoft Excel again, yung example natin. So, just input the values and then click data and then data analysis. And then, click the t-test paired to sample formulas. Click OK. And then, for the variable 1 range, i-click lang natin to, itong A natin, yung mga data natin sa A. And for variable 2 range, i-click lang din natin yung mga data natin sa B. And then, the hypothesizement is 0 for the alpha. Given na alpha sa atin is 0.1. Click OK. And ito yung ma-generate natin na result. So, dun sa kinalculate natin kanina using the equation, the test value is 1.61 dun sa nakalculate natin. The same thing dito sa na-generate ng Microsoft Excel natin. And yung critical na t-value natin, using the table, that is 2.015. So, the same thing dito sa na-generate ng Microsoft Excel natin. So, pareho lang sila. So, as long as you know how to interpret the Microsoft Excel, kayang-kaya nyo nang gamitin to in case nakakailangan ninyo later on kapag magtitesis kayo. So, you can now interpret yung generated result natin. So, given na mas mababa yung test value natin as compared sa critical value natin, nasa labas siya ng rejection region. Therefore, we will accept the null hypothesis. So that is how we use the t-test, and that is how we use the Microsoft Excel in calculating for the calculating for the t-value in doing the t-test. So yun. So again, we have three equations or three formula in solving t-value or in t-test. Meron tayong tatlong equations or tatlong formula depende sa kung anong case ang gusto mong isolve or anong samples ang given sa iyo. Is it dependent? Is it independent samples? Is it isang sample set lang ba or isang data set lang ba? So, depende kung anong formula ang gagamitin mo. So, you must know how to determine kung dependent siya or kung independent siya. So, that's it for t-test. So, I think meron pa tayong tatlong statistical test na hindi natatapos. Let's see kung kaya natin tapusin hanggang sa end ng SEM. So, medyo, I think meron pa tayong 2 meetings, no? So, let's see. So, that's it for today. Have a great day, everyone.